Welcome to another exciting episode of the $1 Million Peddlers. I'm Papergoy.
And I'm Mr. Magazine.
And anybody new to the channel, I'm Papergoy. I have a day job. I sell out of my house. I've got 40,000 items listed on eBay and Amazon, and I provide tips and things like that for somebody in that sort of position.
And I'm Mr. Magazine with 15 employees, 500,000 items, and a big warehouse.
So today we're going to be talking about Mr. Magazine.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome, because the world clamors for more about you. Well, maybe not. But anywho, so you are in a niche of magazines, but you don't just sell magazines at this point. What are your primary things that you sell? If you had to pick out 3 or 4 items that you primarily specialized in.
I would say sports collectibles, record albums, and
magazines.
Well, besides
and toys.
Magazines, yeah, toys. Yeah,
Toys,
definitely,
yep.
That's it.
Yep, and I've kind of gone the other route as Papergoy. I also sell magazines, and then I also sell things like postcards, brochures, some comic books, things like that. Primarily just paper, and then if it's not paper, I tend to move it over to you. We both started at roughly the same time, selling online on eBay.
Yeah.
And so we both kind of started at ground zero roughly the same time. Now, you did have a background through your father's store.
Mm-hmm.
What did you primarily sell through the store?
It changed over the years, but it ended up being sports cards, collectibles, comic books, toys.
Toys,
Stuck with that for a while. And then, got a couple collections of magazines that kind of put me in that direction.
Yeah. So when we started, basically you were at the toys, sports cards, comic books. That was primarily what you knew.
Right, yeah.
And when we started, I basically knew a little bit about toys. Basically, we started at the same place because I knew a little bit about toys, like the newer Marvel and all that stuff, the stuff that was still on the racks at the time.
Yeah. And I collected that stuff too, so it was fun for me, and I had a nice collection, and I bought and sold a lot of that, so it kind of steered me that way.
Now we've completely changed directions because, again, like you said, you're into the magazines, which you weren't when things started. I mean, you may have incidentally been as far as the Incredible Rampaging Hulk and things like that, things like that. But you've really changed a lot, and that's what I want to stress to newer eBayers and newer online sellers that are watching this. Because you start off in a niche, right now you are selling whatever it is you're selling. You're selling glassware. You're selling board games. You're selling whatever you happen to be selling. Doesn't mean that 10 to 15 years from now you're going to be selling exactly the same thing. You may be down into where you're selling toys today, you get into board games, and suddenly 15 years from now, and there are people who make a living doing this, you're selling parts to board games.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You could be into something that much of a niche, where, hey, somebody needs one of the pieces from a Monopoly, and you happen to have it, and they're paying you a few dollars for it, and you ship it on out to them, and you're like, I just never thought that you could make money on this.
Yeah, definitely.
But you need to keep your mind open about various things.
Right.
Now, I remember a story. You may or may not remember it, but do you remember?
I probably won't remember this.
Do you remember the first books that we ever got into? Now, let me ask you this. At this point, how many books do you sell?
More than I want to, but on a daily basis, we probably sell 5 to 10. Between all the platforms. Yeah.
But it isn't something that you seek out, and it isn't something that you have a lot of knowledge about. If a book collection were to come in and the person said this is a 500 collectible books, and they're not something easy like Easton Press, or they're not something like that. He's saying, well, these are first prints, these are third prints. What are you doing with that call?
I either stay. Oh yeah, I definitely give you the call. But if it comes into my shop, I'm either staying away from it or paying very little just because I don't know. I'm more like scan it and list it type of thing.
Yep. And do you remember the first book deal? And it wasn't a big book deal, but the first book deal that you ever purchased through the store?
No, was that with those guys that had the new stuff?
No.
Volume?
Nope.
Then I'm going to say no.
It was a gentleman came up, and I believe he sold you a couple of old Bibles,
Okay.
a couple of Tarzan books,
All right.
and a couple of Lois Lenski kids books.
All right. I do not remember any of this.
And we learned trial by fire. We went and listed them, and then all of a sudden, that's a reprint edition of the Tarzan. The originals were done by that one is done by Grosset and Dunlap.
Yeah.
That's we're like, what? We didn't know. It said 1943 in it or whatever the date was.
Sure.
That Lois Lenski's not a first print. It's a 33rd print. You can tell because, and we were, deer in headlights, to say the least. And the Bible we listed, and it's like, well, this doesn't, is the presentation page filled in?
Right.
Is this? And we were like, huh?
Yeah.
Because we had no idea, and I don't know if you remember that or not, but I remember that clear as day, and I said, oh my goodness gracious, there's so much to learn about books.
Right.
And these other people know so much about it. And maybe that scared you away from books.
Yeah, I mean, well, the one thing comes to my mind is the Federal Aviation Library. Purchasing that just because I knew that was a deal and I knew that stuff was good in there. So, and then we still have some of it, but you learn some of that stuff. I know the airplane stuff is popular and sellable, but I'm still wouldn't consider myself an expert just because I had that collection. And if it came through again, I would still buy it if it's a deal. But if someone, say the collection was 100,000, they wanted 20, 30, 40, I probably would stay away from it because I still don't know that much to get that much more money out of it. Yeah.
Yep, and I guess what to anybody out there that's selling, I think that's the perfect way to do things. If you can, and I'm going to use the word steal. If you can steal the deal, by all means.
Right.
If it's $100,000 worth of stuff and you pick it up for $2,500, you'd be a darn fool not to buy it.
Right.
If it's a $100,000 deal and you pick it up for $15,000 and it's outside of your wheelhouse, unless you plan on getting into that, I would stay away from it. Now, somebody like me that knows, no disrespect meant to you, but I know more about books than you do.
Sure.
What to look for, how to market them, what to mention in them. I might be able to pay the $15,000 or $20,000 on it and do well because when I list it, I know, oh, this is this, this is this, this is this, whereas you wouldn't know. Exactly. And what kind of brought this whole thing up? Well, one of our subscribers kind of asked us to talk about this, so thank you to the subscriber, and do hit the like button if you could and comment down below. But what kind of brought this whole thing up was you have me on time from time to time help you out doing some printing on orders and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I absolutely noticed when I was doing the printing is how few items you sell that I would also sell. Very, very few.
That's a good thing.
It's a very good thing
It
because
works out well for both of us. So.
If a collection comes in that's in your wheelhouse and I have an opportunity to purchase it and the price is right and I can still make a couple of dollars, I'll buy it and I'll flip it to you.
Sure.
Vice versa, it's a collection that that I would really enjoy listing. I'll give you an example that's still sitting in the corner of my house. You had an opportunity to purchase pulps.
Yep.
You purchased them from somebody. I think you made a couple of dollars on it. Maybe you broke even. I don't know. It might have been a deal where you actually broke even, but because you were buying other things from the gentleman, it was one of those.
Anything, it was very
$20 or something.
It was a rounding number or something maybe.
But still,
and if I bought them for myself, they would still be in the corner waiting for my employees to do an okay listing on them. So.
And eventually I will get to them and I will list them. Yeah. I enjoy listing things like that. So it's just interesting, again, when I go through and do the printing for you, I might find, again, if I'm printing 100 orders, I might find 5 that I might have sold myself.
Right.
And it's just interesting because we started at the same spot.
Yeah, right.
Now, there's a lot of different reasons for that. Well, let me ask you, why do you think that is that we've deviated so much?
I think, like you said, there's certain things that you enjoy doing, and you're going to go with that. Certain things I like buying or selling, or if they're easier for me to have my employees list them. Things that are simpler, quicker. We're more on a list so many per hour and moving out instead of something complicated. Unless it's worth $100, and we'll put more time into it. But I think that's part of it for sure.
And my other question on that is, I wonder how much it is that you have different buying opportunities than I have. In other words, somebody comes into your store, most of the people, let's face it, most people have newer items. They just do.
Right.
And so they're coming into the store and they're selling that to you.
Yeah.
I go to estate sales. I mean, there are some newer items at estate sales, but not a ton. Most of the estate sale dealers are going to throw out the newer stuff and not even have it offered. I go to a flea market. Not a lot of people are bringing to the flea market big piles of magazines from the 2000s. They're just
Right,
not
right.
generally
Sure,
doing that.
yeah.
They're tending to bring the older stuff.
Yeah.
So where I can buy the older stuff, whereas a lot
Sure.
of the older stuff doesn't necessarily come in, or if it does, 2, 3, 4 out of a whole bunch of
Right.
stuff that they have.
Yeah.
So I just think it's very interesting, and I think the lesson to you, again, if you're out there selling as it is now, what you're selling today may not be what you're selling tomorrow. And we started off at essentially the same exact place.
Yeah.
I don't tend to sell toys. A couple of reasons. Number one, I don't know a lot about it. Number two, I just don't have the storage for it. Number three, most of what I can sell, you can ship in an envelope.
Yeah.
You
exactly.
cannot
Toys, yeah.
send a lot of toys in an envelope.
Different shapes, sizes, weights, and so forth. Yeah.
So it's a lot more than I'm willing to do. But if we went to a toy show together, I probably would find, because at toy shows there always are a couple of people that have a few oddball magazines and
Sure.
old paper and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would be where I would be going to, and I'd be buying the stuff. Whereas you could walk up to a toy store dealer table and say, oh, that's a $50 item, that's a $20 item, and that's a $30 item. Hey, how much for all three? You got them marked at $10 each.
Right.
And I would just be looking at them all going, $10 each. I'm sure there's some good deals there.
Yeah.
And I would walk on
Right.
because I just don't know them. So I do find that interesting as far as how things change over time. So don't feel like you're locked into what what you're doing right now. You can always change it, and as time goes on, you will change it. And if you have we're not officially partners by any means, but if you have a partner or a good friend,
Oh, go ahead.
if you have a partner or a good friend that also is in the business selling a similar thing, maybe it would behoove you to move a little bit off of what it is you're selling, unless you're making
Right.
big money. Because why bump heads with him all the time
Yep.
if you can buy the stuff and flip it to him and make some money, and meanwhile you can find your own profitable niche,
Yeah.
let him know that you're into that niche, and then he picks up stuff for you. Let's say it is toys. Maybe you're both doing new on-card toys, and then you say, hey, geez, why don't I move into, because I see a lot of times when I'm out there, I see older loose toys.
Right.
Let me get into that, and
Yeah.
I'll learn that stuff, and I'll learn the board games, because that's an
Right.
easy step from the toys or
Sure.
board games.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn the board games, and then when he gets a chance to pick up a lot of board games, he'll just flip them to me, or he only wants to deal new stuff. So if I find sealed board games, I'll trade them to him for old board
Right.
games.
By the way, I do have a gentleman that wants to sell 200 board games, but he didn't like my offer, so maybe you can step up and pay him what he wants.
Yeah, I think we talked about that on the live show, as a matter of fact. He still hasn't come back and wanted to sell them yet?
No, not yet.
He will at some
Yeah,
point,
I
because
think
again,
so.
his price is essentially retail, and you're not going to find a lot of
Not
people
that I'm
pay
the
retail.
highest guy in the world, but in Rochester, there's not probably too many people that are willing to pay a little more than me for 200 board games.
Well, plus, he was asking close to retail on them.
Yeah, and he paid high because he was a collector at the time, too.
Yep. And we did just reference the live show. Do watch it. It's every 7:30 p.m. Wednesdays. That's Eastern Standard Time. Most interactive reselling show out there, and it's a lot of fun for everybody. So do stop on by for that. Do hit the like button, and we will see you next video.
Take care, everybody.